Okay, so here we are. We're already here. Right, so hello everyone, anyone watching the live or the replay. My name is Inav Avni, and this is the Expert Talk. And this week it's all about nutrition for wellness. And in a minute, I will introduce you to Laurie, who is our guest speaker today. So I'll just mention that this conversation started in the Facebook group, Heal Yourself Naturally. And the idea is really to just give some ideas, some insight into things that are very important for us as we want to heal ourselves, away from maybe medicine and pills and stuff like that. But let's get started. Laurie, over to you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and also what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, thank you so much. Welcome, happy to be here. Yes, my name is Laurie Voss-Furukawa. I'm originally from Canada, but have been living abroad for the last 18 years. And in that time and space, I have started on my healing journey. And one main factor is traditional Chinese medicine that plays a huge role in what I do. And I really, from the traditional Chinese medicine information and wisdom that I have, I really work on the energetics. So we look at the energetics of food, energetic eating, and those different properties. And we had one episode already, which was speaking about sugar. I recommend, if you haven't seen it, to go take a look. And if you are interested, today we're going to talk a little bit deeper, going another level of some foods that would benefit us to remove from our diet, which is processed and refined carbohydrates. And I'm going to talk about how we can replace those. So before I get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about the rash on my face, because I did that last week and it's still here. You might see it around. So I was thinking, actually, wanted to say my lips are naturally very red. So my lips are quite normal, a very red color, but it's the space around that I'm healing. And I must be honest with you, I had a setback a couple days ago. It started to come back because I got off track. I was being too lenient and I did some things, ate some things that I shouldn't have. And I noticed within 2 to 3 days, it was coming back. And I said, okay, put the brakes. Like, I need to really be mindful. And I know this, but I'm only human, as we all are. So yes, it is getting better still. I'm still managing it through the food that I'm putting in my mouth and the things that I do in my daily life. But yeah, that's what's going on there. Just in case you're still wondering, or if you haven't seen the first video, it's for me to talk about that. So it's still on the right track. And in that space, I'd just like to mention that healing isn't linear. We often think we want, to get healed, we want to get to that point. There's a lot of things that we might have to go through in order to heal something that's happening in our body. And that's also what I work with in energetic form as well. And I must say that energetically, the tools that I have and have been using has been a pillar for me to get through this as well. Because if I didn't have those tools that help with my mindset and help me to manage my energy, I am absolutely positive I would have been like just crying in the corner because of pain and discomfort that it happens, that it comes and goes through in my space. So definitely, if you're on a healing journey, don't give up. If it feels like you've taken a step back, maybe you fell off the wagon or gotten off track a little bit, just come back, just bring yourself back, because it is so important to just keep moving forward, keep doing the good work that you're doing. And like I say, we don't always see the results as fast as we want, but just having that trust and faith in your own body's ability to heal, it's really important. And if you feel like you don't have any tools to help yourself naturally, I'm here to share some with you. And Inav and other coaches out there have lots of beautiful tools for you. And I strongly recommend to start building your toolbox, because it's really important to have those things for yourself. So now back to today's topic, removing processed and refined carbohydrates from our food and what to replace, or from our diet, and what to replace them with. So first of all, I'd like to just answer or speak about, like, what exactly are they? What am I talking about when I speak about refined or processed carbohydrates? So I was thinking about what's the best way I would describe this. And I was going back and forth, and I thought, you know what, basically in the term of a carbohydrate, it's the food itself has been broken down from the natural source. So if we think about a grain, we've processed, we've refined that grain and made it into a different form. And often in that process, we've taken away nutritional benefits and damaged the original form. So taking out things like fiber, for example, that actually are helpful for our body. And again, many minerals and vitamins that are in the whole form of it. So Yeah, we can think about it as simply as the flour that we can do baking with or cooking with and make breads with, right? That kind of thing. And you might think, well, I don't bake much or I'm not big on cooking. That doesn't really apply to me. But when we get a little bit deeper, we can see um, there's a lot of foods that are processed and refined and that really don't serve us. So some examples of those foods that I'd like to share with you, like breakfast cereals that we have nowadays, those are all refined, processed. Even if it says like made with whole grains, made with 5 whole grains or 7 or 10, they have like all these ridiculous numbers nowadays that they're trying to make it sound good. If it is not the actual whole grain, they're tricking you. They're trying to, it's that marketing ploy. They're really doing their best to say, this is the whole grains, this is the whole grains that you want. But actually, we have come so far away from it when we are buying the things that come in a box or a package or a bag. It's really not doing good for us. So breakfast cereals, breads, also they're coming in a bag and you can get them. They're so processed. There's so much additives, preservatives, all kinds of chemicals in there to keep the shelf life of these products. These are things that are totally processed, refined, that we really need to think about removing and eliminating. Again, step-by-step process, right? We talked about this last week actually, and a lot of these are falling in the same category: the cakes, the cookies, baked good pastries. One thing I didn't mention last week was pasta. That is another refined or processed food. And a lot of people don't really think about it so much, or I say processed carbohydrate. We're focusing on that because I was thinking also like, I don't want to open the door too big. We're just going to still talk about the carbohydrates today. So even with pastas, for example, they'll say whole grain pasta, or it'll be like 5-grain pasta, or these kinds of things. I would still classify them in that same category as processed and refined, and they really are not serving our body. We can, if you really need to have pasta, you can look at some different options. But again, when we get to to the depth of things and dig a little bit deeper, we want to look at why we want to remove it. And the same or similar concepts that we had last week in the video on sugars as well. There is no, or a very little, I would even go with no nutritional value. It's really not serving your body. Same like the sugars. And what's interesting is because some people can say, well, we're getting energy. Energy isn't necessarily the nutrition that serves our body, right? And that's where we get a little bit sometimes misguided, perhaps. The energy that we receive from the pasta. So like runners, athletes, they'll be like eating a big carbohydrate meal before, and often they'll fill up on these kinds of pasta meals and different things like this. Yes, because they are energy dense, but really we can get a better source of energy when we talk about what we're going to replace them with. So the reason why we get that energy is because it breaks down in our body fastest. Carbohydrates are easiest for our body to break down, and it turns it into sugars. And the sugars give us the energy boost. So that's another thing also. We often get addicted to that energy boost. Same or very similar, as I mentioned last week with the sugar topic. It's they're very close, and they both really don't serve our body in any good way. Yeah, where was I with that? Yeah, the breaking down the energy, breaking down into sugars in our body. And then, like I say, we're feeling that, we get the energy, we feel good generally. But I also notice more and more the people are starting to feel upset tummies after eating a plate of pasta or a pizza or bread where there's a lot of processed carbohydrates. And that reason is because of conventional farming that has damaged our crops, damaged the wheat, damaged a lot of the grains that we are eating in the processed form. And when we are applying, or when chemicals are applied to our food and we ingest that, it damages our gut. It damages and offsets the microbiome of our gut. It sets it into a dysbiosis. It causes things like celiac disease. And we can see that that is something that didn't happen 100 years ago. That was something that is quite relatively new disease or illness or dysbiosis of our gut, basically. It's a relatively new thing, and it's really problematic for a lot of people. So they often also write off all carbohydrates as being bad, which actually we need some carbohydrates in our diet. And there's an interesting point I'd like to make as well, because you may have heard of the keto diet or ketogenic diet, right? And this diet wipes out carbohydrates, or basically eliminates carbohydrates and focuses on a high fat, high protein diet. Now, this type of diet, I generally don't recommend. However, it could be beneficial in certain healing situations. There's certain conditions that it could be good for and could actually benefit your body, but it's not sustainable long time. It would be a specific remedy to heal yourself, and it wouldn't be recommended over 3 months because of that high protein, high fat content, which is really, in the long run, hard on our liver, right? So if you really want to think about getting your body and the benefits of a ketogenic state, you can think about intermittent fasting. If you practice intermittent fasting with the 8-16 hour time frame ratio, so your eating window is 8 hours and your fasting hour is 16, you are putting your body into a soft ketogenic state for those 16 hours. If you do it every day, it's beneficial for you. Or if you do it on a regular basis, it really can help your body. And eating this way is more sustainable for our planet as well. And we don't have that heavy burden for our liver in the long run. So that's really something that I wanted to mention there. Also, I want to say, if you have any questions while I'm talking, just raise your hand and I'll stop, and then we can deal with that. Or we can also we will have a Q&A at the end as well. So it's not a problem. Yes. So let's see where else. Yeah, yes. So we also want to think about looking always at the ingredient list. Again, I mentioned this last week, and it is still the same today. And there is lots of wheat tends to be in a lot of things. So that's why I mentioned about the celiac and the wheat products. If we go a little bit off of the carbohydrates, but this is in a lot of things, and it's disrupting our gut again, right? So we want to do our best to eat clean, whole foods. That's really the best. We also, again, as I mentioned last week, it really can kind of develop an addiction to eating these carbohydrates, the processed ones. Because we get that boost of energy, it also fills us up. A lot of people say, oh, it just feels so good when I eat that whole bowl of pasta. It can be like, just feeling of like that, like a warm hug or something. Like you just feel so like, oh, that was so delicious and good. But again, that's that heaviness of the carbohydrates in your body, and it's really an addiction. It really comes down to that. I hear it a lot of times with a lot of my clients and just a lot of friends and family members that I speak to. It's really an addiction, and it's something that, again, we can take it step by step, limiting it. So it's like if pasta is your main meal every day, or a pasta part of it is on your plate every day, or this kind of breads, baked goods, these kinds of things, cereals that are coming out of a box, if these things are in your diet on a regular basis, you can start slowly, step by step, removing them. Again, if you're a person that does good with cold turkey, go for it. I support that as well. But you got to do what's best for yourself, and just, letting go of that guilt and shame, because that's another thing. We carry a lot of energy if the guilt and shame, if you have eaten that, I think, oh man, I ate that again. Okay, I'm going to do better. And these are my reasons why I want this, because I want to eat things that really serve my body. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the processed, refined carbohydrates really don't serve our body. They're really damaging for us overall. And they're just not providing us with any nutritional value. And another phrase that I really like to speak about, and it's going to be our topic for next week, is life force nutrition. We really want to think about foods that are providing life force nutrition for us, right? So what does that mean, life force? It's foods that are alive. They're going to provide us with nutritional goodness that support our body. So that's now what I would like to share with you, some of the things that we can replace these processed or refined carbs with. Whole foods, whole grains. And like I say, we have to be careful. Packages are going to say contains 5 whole grains, you know, these kinds of marketing tricks, kind of like greenwashing, same thing. They're just trying to get us to think that we're still getting it, but actually we need the whole grain. The whole food itself is what is going to provide us with the best nutritional value, with the most life force. A lot of people say also, I don't have time, I'm working, I'm busy, both of my partner and I work, we have kids, you know, and I get it. It can be a real challenge. Step by step. When it comes down to it, it's a planning. Pre-planning and management is a big part of how you can start to make these changes in your kitchen for the food that you're going to eat and the food that if you have children, that they're going to eat as well, because it's going to help them in the long run as well. Some ways that you can think about cooking foods in different ways as well, because a lot of people get stumped by that too. You can think about steaming. Steaming is a really good way to get a lot of nutritional value and eat the whole food. And it's not difficult. You don't have to be standing on the stovetop stirring something. You don't need to worry about burning it. You just turn the steamer on, you know, set the timer for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. I love to do that because I put that on and I go do a 20, 30-minute yoga practice. And it's ready. When I'm done, I can have my supper, something like that, right? So again, it comes with the management of how you can do things. There's slow cooker is another really good one as well that can really help us to get a lot of good nutrients in from these whole foods. Now, whole grains. I know a lot of people think boring. They're not even sure what they are maybe as well. So I have a little list for you. There's 6 main ones that I like to have in my kitchen and I rotate. We want to think about diversity as well. So millet, amaranth, quinoa, buckwheat, barley, and brown rice. Those are 6 really amazing whole grains that you can start to incorporate in your diet. And again, if you can rotate them and have that diversity, you're even getting better nutritional value for your body. And when we have more nutritional value and more diversity, we have a better opportunity to get all the minerals, vitamins, and nutrients that we need that are going to support our health on all levels. There is an important part behind whole grains that we must think about when we are preparing them. They need to be soaked before we eat them. And now there's lots of different information out there about this. And I'll give you my analogy that I learned from my teacher, and I love to share it with my students and all the people that I speak about with. So the plant, if we think about a grain of rice, a plant of rice, for example, right? That grain of rice on there, every plant, the mother plant, has those little babies, those little grains all over, right? And those little babies have a special coating on them. The mother plant puts that coating on outside of those grains, and that coating on there helps to protect that grain from fungus and bacteria and germs from breaking it down and destroying it, right? So that little coating on the outside of that grain is harmful for our digestive tract. Beans and legumes also fall into this category as well. Same with nuts and seeds. So what we do is soaking that grain for 8 to 12 hours or overnight. I like to do it overnight. So that's where I start. I'll start mine in the evening, and that's where the pre-planning comes in. I soak mine in the evening, what I know I'm going to eat for breakfast. In the morning, rinse it off, and I cook it. And I'm putting it into what I have is a Thermomix, but I've also used a rice cooker. You can also use stovetop as well. But it's nice when you have something like a kitchen appliance that lets it, you know, the cooking that does itself. You can manage it by time. You can also manage the temperature on there. And you can add different ingredients in there to make things savory or sweet. And there's many different things that we can talk about for adding different flavors. And this is basically the breakfast cereal that you want to be having. That is really life changer, game changer. Absolutely. When I learned this information and started doing it in my diet, in my life in 2018, my health changed completely. Absolutely. At that time, when I was learning these tools, I was not in a good space. Physically, I had some different health issues. So I knew when I learned from these, when I knew when I learned this information from my teacher, I need to put it into practice. If it's true, what he's telling me is going to help my body, I need to do it. And I did, and it helped my body. And that is why I'm so passionate to share this information with other people, because it is so powerful. I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to learn this and to put it into practice in my life. And for the last 5 years, I've been doing this and every day. And I tell you, when I don't eat those beautiful whole grains for breakfast, I notice my body's off, specifically if it's when a traveling space or when I'm usually traveling. That's the most, because if I'm in my own house, I'm doing this. I in my own kitchen, it happens every day. But if I'm in someone else's space, or like I say, in a hotel, then it's always a little bit different. And I notice it. My body doesn't have the same energy levels. Hence what happened a couple months ago, part of the factors, right? So yes, that is where I'd like to leave you today. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I hope that what I shared with you today was nice and clear. If not, I can maybe bring some more clarity. Thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you so much, Laurie. This has been fascinating, but yes, so many questions that come up to my I guess where do I start? I guess I'll start with the soaking first. Because I guess a lot of the time now you get some packages of all sorts, and you see this kind of, it's already been soaked. So basically, well, before we had an automatic kind of go on automatic to say, oh, this kind of thing you need to soak it. Now they kind of said that it's already been soaked. So are we saying basically ignore that and just soak it anyway, because then at least you know for sure what is happening?
I would question the practices that they use. So I wouldn't buy it. I would buy the whole grain in its whole form, as natural and organic as possible. I really have a hard time trusting a lot of food companies that they are doing what they say. And I I don't know how long they soaked it for and what they did to dry it. Did they dry it on a high heat? Did they roast it after? What did they do? I don't know. And if they did roast it on a high heat after, you're also losing your nutritional value. So I really recommend going with the whole grain, whole form, as close to natural as possible. But very good question, because it's common to see like this pre-boiled, parboiled rice, all these different things out there. Yeah, no need to soak. Everybody wants things so fast and so convenient, but it's really like we must take a little bit more time and nurture our health. It's necessary. It's really necessary.
Yeah, and I think that brings me to my next question, because so like we just mentioned, there's grains and there's lentils and there's lagoon, what do you call it? Not lagoon, but
Legumes, nuts and seeds,
yeah,
grains,
all of these
lentils,
things.
yeah, all of it.
Yeah, that brings my English here. But how do we actually know what, like you say, the grain is very important. So you mentioned the 6 grains that and I know you've mentioned these before. But what about other things? I mean, things that I consider like beans, for example, and I consider them healthy, and I have no, knowledge about what healthy is. It's just that in my mind they're healthy. Are we basically, do I need to also question all of these if they come in a can or in a packet, or what do I do?
So in a can, it's been somehow processed, right? So you can question that. There's probably different ingredients included in the can. Although not necessarily, there's some that, again, reading the ingredient list, there's some that you can get that is just, like for example, I've seen jars of chickpeas that it's like really just chickpeas and like maybe a salt brine or salt like this. So I would just rinse them off. Although I highly recommend, again, going to the whole source. It's not very difficult to make your own chickpeas for cooking, for example, to be able to, again, soak them 8 to 12 hours, rinse them, cooking them for approximately 1 hour, depending on the quality of the grain or the chickpeas in this case, it'll be ready. And then you can make hummus, you can make anything you want with it. So yeah, if it's coming from a can, it's been processed in some way. And again, we don't really know the quality of it. In a pinch, it's not bad. I just wouldn't use it every day or regularly in my cooking.
Mm.
Mhm.
Another thing, I think the idea of going back to going back to source, but cooking everything from scratch, doing all of these things, which, to my mind sounds wonderful. And yet I don't do it. I don't, we cook our dinners and stuff, but I do notice what my kids are eating. I say, like, most of the things that they're eating is processed. And, whatever I try to, hey, even a cucumber comes in a bag, basically. So, everything is kind of, is all out there. But how do we move forward like, we're not going to go 100% into all of this, straight away. But what are some steps that we can actually do? What if I only do one thing differently? What is it? What should it be?
Oh my gosh, only one thing differently. Oh, I know what I want to say, but I'm not sure. Okay, I'll say it. I would stop buying the processed food. Now, that doesn't mean, or that doesn't allow us to say, oh, well, then what am I eating, right? Like, how I still have to cook my supper. But like you say about your kids only eating or mostly eating processed food, that kind of thing is quite common for a lot of families, a lot of children. This is the case. It's like, who's the one doing the shopping? Who buys this food, right? And if your children do the shopping, you better give them a shopping list and say, this is what you're coming home with, that kind of thing, right? So it's like, because if it's in the house, and I say this with the most sincerity, I grew up also having a lot of whole good food on the table, but we also had cupboards full of junk food, and I ate the junk food. I snuck it, I went there, and then when it came time to eat the whole good food, I wasn't really hungry and barely ate that, because your taste palate also adjusts to that processed, chemical filled flavors. And the real food, the broccoli, the whole grains, the potatoes, those things don't appeal to our taste buds anymore. So it's really a process of not having those it's a process of not having the refined processed foods in our house. Removing those is really slowly, and maybe again with that dialogue, hey kids, there's going to be some changes, enjoy this last bag of crisps or whatever, right? Enjoy this last one, or it's only going to be a treat. For example, we only have it on the weekend or only on Saturday. You can, that, does that answer your question in terms of one thing? I don't know.
It's not even a crisps,
Yeah.
it's even just a sandwich for packed lunch. It's
Mm-hmm.
everything, even the things that are normally we say, well, out of a couple of options, this is the healthiest. It's still like the bigger scheme of things, it's still processed. It's still not good. But yeah, it's exactly that kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, and then wait, I had a question and it disappeared. It will come back to me. It will come back to me. But I'll ask another one. I told you I had tons of them. When we talked about, and I, like you said, next week we will talk about the energy life force food, which sounds fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to that as well. But in my mind, when I'm thinking about my own eating, I'm thinking one day when I grow up, I probably want to do, raw food is probably what I really want to get into. But is that even, would that give me everything? Or yes, I don't know.
Good question. That's a really good question. Actually, I would put it in a similar category as the ketogenic diet that I mentioned earlier. It can be beneficial for certain healing conditions, but I wouldn't recommend it for long term. Again, like 3 months or something of this maximum kind of time frame. When we look at life force, raw foods have life force, but they are raw. And when we think about the energetics in terms of a TCM perspective, a yin and yang, which can be basically foods are warm or cooling, warming or cooling, raw foods are basically all cooling.
Mhm.
So our body is warm naturally, and we want to work on keeping that warmth. So when we're only eating cold foods, it can lead to a very yin, low energetic state overall in a long term. So I wouldn't recommend it for long term. It could be beneficial, like I say, for a certain time frame for healing. Yes.
And that's another question that I wanted to ask. I think when I speak with people, it is so confusing to know what to do and what to do generally and what to do more specifically for people's conditions and whatever the illness or pain that they're going through. What is a rule of thumb that people can think? I mean, last week we said, number one, stop having sugar. Okay, so we've done that. But now what? How do we know what is right for us and what is not?
How do you know what's right for you and what's not? I guess mostly is listening to your body, learning to listen to your body. For example, like I say, about even eating pasta. Some people can eat it and they're perfectly fine, and the next person eats a bowl of pasta and they feel ridiculously bloated, right? So if you're feeling bloated, you need to stop, something like that. But now, in terms of what we want to have, and like you say about how do we know, listening to your body is really the best way. And again, with the proper preparation. So if you're eating the whole grains, they need to be prepared properly. Otherwise, they can also provide that space for discomfort in our gut as well. So yeah, does that answer your question? My biggest focus is really to put people on a whole grain path, because I really have felt the benefit in my life. And I know that this is a beautiful source of vitamins and minerals and energy for our body.
Yeah, and it's definitely, it's definitely worth being told about it or reminded about it. It's that is definitely. And if you answered that question, I don't think that question was really possible to answer because I think it's every person has their own journey, isn't it? And I know really how confusing it is, especially when people want to heal. I have a friend. She is suffering from arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, and she was listening to something that is called Gersing therapy, and it's basically very strict, very, very strict diet of just juices and everything is raw. And I don't know. I looked at it. I was like, maybe I should look into that a little bit more. And when I saw what is required, I was like, maybe not. But this therapy apparently is supposed to be very helpful for cancer. So people with cancer, and they have that, then they have bigger or higher chances of recovery. But it didn't work so much for the arthritis, I must say. But but this was another thing. You see, that's another thing that people say. Well, I hear that this could be good, and then they say, okay, I'm going to get started with that. And how do they even know? Because even if they go to the doctors don't talk to them about diets and foods.
Yes. Yeah, it can be very challenging. Like I say, because of raw food, or like you say, like with a lot of juices and this kind of these are all raw, right? When we're doing juices and smoothies, that kind of thing. And that also can be very hard on our gut, actually, even though it seems like a very pure, whole juice, especially if you're making it on your own. But it can be challenging if your microbiome is out of balance in your gut. And like you say, how do we know? Can be a form of really just listening to your body. So if it's not working, if it doesn't feel good, but also doing your best, if you can find an alternative practitioner in your area, perhaps, or a doctor. There can be ones online as well. I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to pretend that I am. I have this information to share, but I'm, like I say, I'm not a doctor. I don't hold a PhD. But for example, in traditional Chinese medicine, they'll do tongue reading analysis, pulse reading as well. And they're asking you a plethora of questions. What's your digestion like? What's your sleep like? Hair loss, this, that, all kinds of questions are being asked that don't get asked at regular conventional doctors' appointments. So doing your best to find an alternative doctor can really be beneficial.
Yeah. That's good. That's good to put out there, actually. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just for me it can be so confusing. When I look at ingredient list, I never understand any of this. Like, unless it says sugar, wheat, the easiest things to understand. Otherwise, I feel very, very confused by it. But
Yeah, basically, if you also don't know a lot of the words on the ingredient list, probably it means it's a chemical that isn't serving your body. I apologize if you can hear my dog barking in the background. Happens. But yeah, that's why we also, it's like the fact that they're even, a lot of times there is this ingredient list. Why is this? Like, again, go back to the whole foods. We really need to think about going to the whole foods, buying the whole foods, fruits and vegetables. And whole foods is in terms of the grain, you know what's in it, you know how you're cooking it. It does, again, take that time, starting up here, right? Starting the shifts. This is what I want to buy. I'm not going to buy this anymore. I want to do this because I want to be healthier. I want to feel better. I want to move better, etc., etc.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Great. I mean, I think these are my main questions for now. Andrew, I don't know. Do you have any questions or anything to add?
Oh, thank you for that. No, but perhaps not direct questions, but just related to sort of my experience of this. It's totally unscientific. Am I right in saying here that the higher those foods that have the higher proportion of this stuff and the high degree of process are, breaking down this way, are the prepared stuff, the convenient stuff, and all of that. So to categorize things that way, that's the way I've sort of learned it, as it were, and the way I've cut things down. Processed is if it comes in a packet, if it comes in a jar, can, what have you, anything that's sort of ready-made, pre-prepared, etc., etc., has got a lot of this stuff in it, and it's got a lot of these broken down or carbohydrate down, etc., etc. So that's what I've cut out a lot of in my diet. I don't do it sort of, because having some sort of convenience is very helpful at certain times, or having stuff in the cupboard is, in the store cupboard is very handy sometimes. On the schedule, or you've got a full day and you don't finish till 7 o'clock in the evening, etc., etc. And if you haven't pre-prepared stuff and you haven't done anything like that, what you're going to do? Go for something like that, or just have a 24-hour fast. It's that kind of thing. So I think this, and the other thing is just about getting into the habit of doing things. The one thing that I haven't got much of is willpower. That if I've got something at home that is on the bad list, shall we say, I've got to get it out of the home or eat it and then start again. So I don't have it there, then I haven't got an issue with it. So I think there's how you sort of get into dealing with that and habit. You've got to sort of get rid of all the stuff that you don't want. So there's temptation, and then you've got to sort of start building it up and perhaps doing it gradually. Or as you mentioned, this is a point I could ask here, is when you said that you can do it sort of gradually, or is it acceptable in the eyes of changing things? I tend to have eat very healthily and not so much food till Monday and Tuesday, which I call my sort of green days, because I don't have food. I don't have, right, I tend to sort of, particularly after, if it's been a rather indulgent weekend, I sort of cut down that way. And also, it tends to be that I don't go out or right in the evening, Monday and Tuesday, whether I might do Thursday, Friday, or the weekend. So I find it easier to do it that way. And then I tend to sort of I don't know, build up a bit as the week goes on. Over the longer term, is that more of an acceptable way, from your point of view, in your eyes, more of an acceptable way forward? That there's, you're getting a balance here, that we may not live like this 7 days a week. That would have to be the ideal, but it might not be the ideal for everyone, given the constraints of modern life and the demands and etc., etc. Is it better to do it part of the time than none of the time? Or
Absolutely.
is the good that you do on the days that you do it well negated by having a blow at the weekend, shall we say? And then you go back to doing it the next week. So that sort of thing. I found that particularly from the weight loss aspect of things, it's quite a good thing. I'm finding it good. I'm not saying that everything I eat there is perfectly healthy, but I find it easier to cut out certain foods than others. I can cut out bread quite easily. I can cut out potatoes quite easily. I don't eat much rice. I'm very seldom with rice. Pasta, well, there again, pasta for me has been the go-to, whereas it might be rice to somebody else. So, what are the best forms of pasta to buy, or are you saying you should cut it out? Period.
Okay, good questions. Kind of, you had a couple there, a little bit poked in.
Yeah.
Good points in general. In terms of, like you said, about like maybe doing like 3 days on, 4 days off, or vice versa, something like that.
Yeah.
I think, again, we're only human living in a world that doesn't always allow us to have the time and space to be cooking whole foods every day, or even at home every day. So we have to do what's best for us, right? And that's where it's like acceptance and letting go guilt and shame, and just like, yeah, this is where I'm at, and this feels good for my body. If you start to have health problems and things are really adding up and this, well, then maybe you need to take a more strict approach naturally, right? But if it's working for you, I mean, like you say, you also ask kind of like, does the 3 good days negate the 4, or the bad days, do they like outride each other?
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I don't know exactly what you're consuming, and I don't know if we even would have a calculator to make that estimation.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether is this an all or none sort of thing, or if you do it part of the time, or you cut down on certain things, is that going to be beneficial to you? Obviously, if you get rid of the whole lot, it's going to be better. Is there a halfway house, shall we say, and is that better than not doing it at all?
Part-time is better than no time. Right? Yeah. So if you even if you're only allowing yourself like 2 days a week, it's still better than not at all, or whatever it is, So again, we got to do what's right for ourselves in our time and space that's available. Because the other option is like, well, I can't do it at all, and every day I'm just going to eat late dinners and eat all these processed foods. Well, that's surely going to be deteriorating your health faster, right?
Yeah.
So definitely there. Like I say, part-time is better than no time. And there was another question you had asked about pasta. You said, what's the best pasta?
Yeah.
So
because there's so many, there's so much, is there something that can you get pasta that's already of a better quality than wheat or whatever?
Well, what I look for, and generally I have access to, depends where I am around the world, but what I would do is I avoid wheat-based pastas or whole grain ones, because I don't want the wheat. I know wheat is one of the worst crops already now that we have destroyed on our planet, unfortunately, because of Monsanto and all these other chemicals. So I highly recommend getting rid of a wheat-based pasta. So I would suggest basically almost any alternative is better. If I am buying a pasta that's a grain based, I would go with spelt, that I can usually find pretty easily where I am. And now there's also sometimes other options at some health food stores where there's like, even I've seen green pea pasta or chickpea pastas, there's lentil pastas. Not necessarily my favorite taste and texture, but there's things that you can try there. There was also some different pastas I think I've seen. I think like there's also like buckwheat noodles. This is a Japanese, they have this soba noodles or different ones. This one can be it's a different type of pasta, but there can be another option as well. There's also, what was there? I've seen quite a few now coming up in health food stores. I think there might have even been like, there's rice pastas as well, this glass noodles. These are some different options. Again, you could have some different variety. Again, when I say these things, I'm not recommending them on a regular or daily basis, but like you say, an alternative to have in your kitchen, as opposed, I would say wheat pasta, get it away. It's really a disruptor, unfortunately, in this day and age. And that reminds me one point I wanted to make also from when you talked about the having some prepackaged, maybe ready-made foods that are easier to cook on the days that you don't have time. Maybe a good also alternative to that, and I don't necessarily disagree, because it is like, okay, yeah, you have that box that's easy, or this one package that's easier to make when you need it, right? But a nice alternative is when you do make whole food and a good healthy meal, make a little bit extra and put it in the freezer, and put it in your freezer in portion sizes that are meal sizes. So that's a really nice one. So you always can have that to take out, and that's a really good one. That then you're going to get better than the store bought. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And the other thing is, here is it's getting into the habit, developing the habits of doing this, not buying whatever and then buying a replacement. And that becomes in itself something that you have to work out to start with, like changing any habit. This is what I do when I'm on my work. And there's no difference in around your diet. You have to have the intention, set the intention to do it. Right, we're not having this or this or this, and we're going to replace it with this, this, and this. And that takes a bit of getting used to. And also there will be a knock-on effect to start with, about how we react to the taste of these things, because you have to get used to these things. The same as if you cut sugar out of your coffee or whatever. That takes a little bit of getting used to, until all of a sudden you're used to it, and then when you do have sugar in your coffee, you think, oh, that's horrible. So you have to sort of customize to these things as well.
Absolutely.
Something that I like to say is, if we go 100%, like you say, cold turkey, some people can do it. I don't like it, but I always say, what is 5% better or different that you can do today? And 5% is usually just, a really nice start. And then we see that actually it wasn't as bad as we imagined when we were still.
I think that's a very good point. It's sort of weaning yourself off something slowly, so you're not really noticing it. And that maybe you say it's the cold turkey effect, because we're so used to having this stuff, and it's full of all these things that, and we get used to it. And I think at the end of it all, people have really got to want to do it. And also, what's the reason behind it? Because if you've got a serious health issue, then that becomes the reason. And that's a pretty big reason. For those who haven't, but just want to be a bit healthier all round, then there has to, you have to make a good case for yourself, a good case for up here as to why you want to go through this stuff. I think that becomes an important thing for people. Because once people have that why, once they have the reason, and that reason is strong enough, the method of how you do it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. But as we know, it's easier for us to move or to change when we connect with a negative reason why we should not. So when
it's the moving away from the moving towards. And most people start off with, right, I don't want this, I don't want to be unhealthy, or I don't want the weight I've got, if I want to live, or whatever it might be. And then it's moving towards anything. And then as you do, it becomes moving towards specific things. Yeah.
Well, I guess on this note, we kind of come to an end for today. Laurie, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and encouragement, and planting the seeds, whole grain seeds.
Yes. My pleasure. Thank you as well for hosting and for being here, and the beautiful questions that you both had and the input, because it's really nice and it helps other people, I think, who watch this to get a lot of input.
It's very enlightening, and it makes you think, and also, how can I just improve a little bit more? Whatever you're doing at the moment, you can always improve.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And next week, as we said, it's Life Force Foods. I'm really excited about that. So thank you, thank you, everyone. Andrew, for being here
Take care,
on the
bud.
live
Yeah, great.
thing. And then everyone else
Okay.
that's watching.
Thank you
this
so much.
if you can just leave us a message, what did you, what is one thing that you got today? And what is one thing that you can do 5% differently? That would also be lovely. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And I'll see you next.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
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 Bye.